If I wanted to get that information out to the general public, what that study actually said, a study that was conducted by the United States government, I could potentially go to jail. Does that make any sense? It's the biggest fraud that's ever been perpetrated on the United States. That's a proven fact. That actually happened. And that makes me sick, and it also makes me angry. You ask me why I'm doing this? That's why I'm doing this. Right now, the most successful people in the world are prepared for anything that comes their way. I taught myself to ask more questions and how to get more out of life. If you want more, it really can happen, and it's simple strategies and techniques. These aren't pie-in-the-sky things. I'm not one of these guys telling you about how to be successful and never done it. I do it every single day.
This is the Alden Report.
All right. Well, welcome to another edition of the Alden Report. My name is Michael Alden, and you're here in Blue Vase Studios in Beverly, Massachusetts. So I'm real excited to be here again today. I hope you all had a tremendous weekend. Hope you had a lot of fun. Yesterday the weather was a little difficult here in Massachusetts. It was raining a lot. But I always try and have a good day. I always try and have fun, even in the difficult weather. So, what are we going to talk about today? Well, there's so many things to talk about, and I was talking to one of my producers today, before we got in. She said, "What are we going to talk about?" I said, "Well, I should probably figure it out before we go in there, right?" Well, one of the things that I think a lot of people, there are a lot of things that people have challenges with, but I was just talking to someone in my office a little while ago about failure. I tell people that I've never failed at anything. And that's a pretty bold statement to say. I've never failed at anything. And failure to me is also fatal. So when I think of failure, I think of something that truly has come to an end. And that's it. It just ended. I tell people that I suffer temporary defeats every single day. And I learned that from Zig Ziglar. I've talked about this before. I've had the opportunity to sit down and speak with him. I went to the 59th anniversary of his 21st birthday, which is, if you do the math, it's his 80th birthday, I believe. I've had dinner with him. In fact, we did an infomercial with him years ago. I'm a big fan of his books. His books really helped me tremendously when I was younger. And he talks a little bit about failure, and again, he calls them temporary defeats. So I also I like to use that same theory in life. And when you look at some of the things that I've gone through, a lot of people would look at them as a failure. I graduated law school, and I took the bar exam, and the first time around, I actually missed it by one question. Now, that's difficult to deal with. One question was the difference between passing and not passing. Not failing, but not passing. Okay, a lot of people say it's a pass-fail, and that's, academia will tell you that, that you failed. Well, if I truly failed, I would have given up and not gone back and taken the bar exam and passed. The interesting thing about the bar exam here in Massachusetts, and actually in most states, is that when you fail, you actually get your score. So you know kind of where you made mistakes, and they show you the exam, and they show you what you did wrong. The first time around, I was not prepared for the bar exam. And in my book, Ask More, Get More, where's that book? There it is. A little shameless promotion right there for those of you on Periscope. Ask More, Get More. #1 bestseller on Amazon, #2 on Wall Street Journal, USA Today. I'm pretty proud of that. But I talk about, how to be prepared. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in some of the live trainings and some of the seminars here at Blue Vase campuses. But failure, again, is something that's fatal. It's something that you have ultimately just given up on. And when you start to change how you think about failure and think about it as more of a temporary defeat and not necessarily a failure, your mindset things in your head, they start to change. They really, really do. And I don't mean to make this whole thing all about me, right? But a lot of the stories that I have really are about me and the people that are surrounding me. I'm not going to make up stories just for the purposes of content. So, so for those of you who don't like that, I apologize, but it kind of is what it is. But when I didn't pass the bar exam, and people were calling me and telling me, really kind of expressing their concerns for me, and they said, Mike, I'm sorry that you didn't pass, and it's really too bad, and a lot of people don't pass the first time, and JFK Jr., oops, oh, there goes Periscope. Hold on, Periscope. Hold on. That's pretty classic. Periscope, where are you? There you are. That's pretty awesome. So we're gonna get you back set up over here. I should probably not. Oops, that's right. Steve, if you were here, this wouldn't have happened. So that's one of my other producers, Steve. He kind of his fault there on that one. But now that, for some people, would call that. Where am I? Here we are. We're back. It's tight in here in the studio. We got a couple cameras going. Some people would call that a failure. They would say, you fucked up big time. No, that's we'll call that a temporary defeat. It'd be a failure if I just went off Periscope and called it a day. Lost my train of thought there. Anyway, so we're talking about failure, and we're talking about me not passing the bar exam, and people reaching out to me and saying, Mike, it's too bad you didn't pass. A lot of people don't pass the first time. It took JFK Jr. 5 times to pass the bar exam. None of that made me feel any better, But as far as I was concerned, even back then in my late 20s, I didn't look at it as a failure. One of the biggest things in that scenario was I wasn't prepared. And in my book, Ask More, Get More, as I was giving you the shameless plug here of Ask More, Get More, I talk about how you can mitigate and prevent failure and stop the negativity that comes along with that. I wasn't prepared the first time for the bar exam. That's just a fact. I only studied for a few weeks, and it's the type of exam that you need to study for more than just a few weeks. It's more like 13 weeks. Second time around, I took it. I passed it. Again, you don't necessarily know what you got the second time around, but the second time around, I felt as though that I knew more about the law than I would ever know, and I was prepared to go in. I wasn't afraid to fail. And that's kind of what we're going to talk a little bit more about is failure, and how so many people, there's two different things, right? There is success and then there's failure. I tell people that there is no such thing as a failure gene or a success gene. Okay, so for those of you that believe that people are just born with something, there's some sort of genetic predisposition one way or the other, scientifically, that's not a fact. There's no such thing as a failure gene, and there's no such thing as a success gene. So you can't use that as an excuse as why you're not doing well. Why you're not where you're at in life. Why you're not where you want to be, and things like this. So again, there's nothing genetically that's going to make you any different than me as it relates to success or failure. But again, so when we're looking at failure and we start to say to ourselves, well, it's this task that I had, that I was trying to achieve, it didn't happen. I didn't get there. I didn't accomplish my goal. If you look at it as if it wasn't a failure, and we call it a temporary defeat, your mind is able to program itself and move forward much easier if you're telling yourself that it's not a failure. But again, we're talking about success, right? And we're talking about failure. And I said there's two things. that none of us have within our bodies. It's not in our DNA. There's no such thing as a success gene, no such thing as a failure gene. But people are afraid of those two things. And there's some schools of thought that say most people are afraid of success. But those people that are afraid of success are really more thinking about failure. They're afraid to fail. So sometimes they kind of overlap. In other words, you're thinking as a person, I don't want to fail. I'm afraid to fail. I don't want to seem like a failure. Because you always hear when you're younger, you don't want to be a failure in life, right? You don't want to disappoint your parents. You don't want to disappoint your teachers. You don't want to disappoint your family. Don't be a failure, right? So you're programmed as a young child here in the United States, and not only in the United States, but all over the world. We're programmed to be deathly afraid of failure. Now, there's nothing wrong with fear. I think fear is a good thing, okay? You can fear failure, right? But where most people screw up, so to speak, is they're afraid to fail. See, you can fear failure. Okay, that's one thing. There's nothing wrong with fear. It's a good thing. It drives a lot of people. Okay? You can fear it. But don't be afraid to take the step that could possibly lead to a temporary defeat and not a failure. You see the difference there? You can fear it. Fear it in your head. I don't want to fail. I don't want to suffer a temporary defeat. Again, I like to call them temporary defeats. It's okay. But don't be unwilling to take that step to move forward and possibly suffer a major temporary defeat. That is the key. And again, a lot of people, they're afraid of success. They're afraid of success because they can't even begin to comprehend what success really means to them and what it means in society. Move over a little bit. So a lot of people, they're afraid of success as well. Because if you look at history, you go back to kings and queens, everyone always hates the people at the top. People always hate the successful ones. And I don't know why that is. Now, kings and queens might be a little bit different because they're maybe born into it. But when you look at successful people in the United States or in the world, a lot of people, they have disdain for them. They feel as though that they're bad people. Successful people. And so that now you as an individual, we say, well, I don't want to be that guy or gal. I don't want to be that guy that appears to be some sort of, maybe, I don't know, douchebag or something. But that's really, that's not it. There are douchebags on all levels, okay? But becoming successful doesn't make you a bad person. So again, there's two things we're talking about, right? We're talking about, as a young child, most people are taught, don't be a failure, okay? Don't disappoint your parents. Don't disappoint your family. Don't disappoint your school teachers. Don't fail. And that same family is also kind of teaching you to be humble, which is an important thing, right? You can be very, very humble and be very, very successful. Okay, so there's nothing wrong with being successful. But the most successful people in the history of the world fail every single day. And some of them are the true definition of failure. They're done. It's a fatal mistake in whatever venture that they were trying. But the most successful people understand, and they've programmed their mind. They've programmed their mind to recognize that what most people call a failure is really a temporary defeat. and they are able to move past it. You know, I ran into an old friend, and I was talking about some of the things that we have going on here at Blue Vase Marketing. I was talking about one of our business ventures I'm so excited about called draftdemons.com. It's a daily fantasy sports website. It's really kind of really creating a lot of buzz in the daily fantasy sports world. Again, it's called draftdemons.com. You should check it out if you like daily fantasy sports. And I was talking to her about Emery Vodka, and I was talking to her about Unit 5, the comic book Unit 5, which Blue Vase is also helping out with. And she says, boy, Mike, you know, everything you touch is gold. And I said, it's the complete opposite. It is the complete opposite of that. We fail as an organization. I fail as an individual way more times than I succeed. And when I say failure, I do mean the fatal kind. But 90% of the time, I'm looking at things as a temporary defeat. A temporary defeat, not a failure. Because failure really is the end. And I don't like to see things happen that way. If I were to look at every business venture that we got involved in, if I were to look at every advertisement that we produce, if I were to look at every initiative that we do here that doesn't work, and if I were to call it a failure, that is a huge, huge negative thing. Very, very negative. And most people, again, they don't listen to the things that I'm saying. Maybe they haven't read the books that I've read. Maybe they're not here on Periscope. Maybe they're not listening to my podcast or watching this video on YouTube or on my website. And when they think of failure, they think of it in the traditional sense of most people. And they think of it truly as the end. And then what happens is when you think of something as a failure, it's ingrained in your brain, and it gets worse, and it continues to get worse. And I talk about excusatosis in my book, and that's also something that happens with people. I say it's one of the most prolific diseases that are out there, and that's our minds making excuses for ourselves. But failure happens the same way. So if you look at failure truly as a fatal thing, as the end, as something that you really just you cannot overcome, and it's the end, and you have just really disappointed everybody. You've disappointed your peers, you've disappointed your parents, you've disappointed yourself, and you consider yourself a failure. What does that do to your confidence? Right? What does that do to your confidence? It hurts. And confidence, we'll talk about that at a later date, confidence is something that when you look at successful people, they all have. They're all confident in whatever they do. So if your brain, day in and day out, is failing, and you tell yourself that you're a failure, and other people tell you that you're a failure, because, again, when you look at the world today, the way I see it, you know, and I do a lot of work with some charities, and I'm on a couple boards, and I see this in other communities, that it usually starts with the family. Unfortunately, that's usually where it starts. It starts with the family. And if your family is telling you that you're a failure, and that you're no good, and that everything you do goes wrong, that does something to your psyche. And if you look at a brain scan, like I have, there is an actual chemical and physical reaction to every emotion that you have, and to every thought that you have. And the negative thoughts produce chemicals in your brain and in your body that are toxic. And they can continue to get worse. So when you look at people who society would deem as a failure, and if you were able to do a brain scan or a body scan and test their blood, they would have chemicals and toxins in their body that successful people don't have. And when you look at people when they have positive emotions versus negative emotions, the positive emotions are filled with things like oxytocin, right? Which is essentially a hormone in your body that makes you feel happy, and serotonin, okay? And other chemicals and hormones that are released in your body when you're happy. And if you look at negative people, people will consider themselves a failure. And you look at their brains. Their brains, they're not smooth. It looks like it's all rocky. It looks like the bottom of the ocean. It's a mess. Also the same thing with drug addicts. When you look at drug addicts and you look at what they do and what it does to their brain, it almost has the same effect as doing drugs. So if you consider yourself a failure, if your family continues to tell you that you're failing, and you fear failure so much that you begin to believe that you're a failure, your brain actually physically manifests itself and physically changes. You know, we talk about addiction, you hear people say once an addict, always an addict, and the reason why they say that, it's chemically and physiologically in your brain. Certain things happen when you do drugs and you alter the chemistry of your body. And you can do the same exact damage to your brain, to your psyche, to your soul, if you believe that you're a failure. If you believe what your parents said to you. If you believe what some maybe bad teacher said to you. And you continue to live your life in fear of failure. I mean, it's really profound if you think about it. So many people live their lives like this day in and day out. And they're not introduced to information that I've been introduced to and met the people that I've met. And again, I'm just like you. You know, when I have something go wrong, my first reaction, like most people, is man, this sucks. You know, I remember when I was a kid, I used to say to my mom, like, why is it so difficult for me? Why does it always take so much hard work? Or what, and I know what it's like. You know, I think I told people before, I declared bankruptcy as a result of one business. Failed the bar exam. You know, I knew why I failed the bar exam, and it sucked and it hurt. And a lot of people in those types of situations are paralyzed by the fear of failure. Paralyzed. I mean, imagine you go to undergraduate school first, 4 years, okay? Then you go to law school, 3-4 years, depending on how you did it. I went nights, so it was 4 years. Oh, that's great. And then you have to actually take the bar exam. And then you don't pass the bar exam. But you get that far, and you're still so paralyzed that you don't even decide to take the bar exam. I went to law school with people that decided not to take the bar exam. You know, for some people, that maybe they just wanted the education, but you get that far. The reason why is because people were afraid to fail. And it makes me wonder, you know, what could have been if they actually went and took the bar exam. You know, and if you're thinking about yourself or maybe your family members, your loved ones, and maybe there's a test that you should have taken maybe years ago. And the reason why you didn't take it is because you were paralyzed with fear. You were afraid of failing. But at the end of the day, who cares if you fail? The only person that really cares and should care is you. And if you tell yourself, if you go take that test, if you move forward with the initiative that you want to move forward with, that you've been thinking about for years, and it doesn't work the first time, is that a failure? Well, to some people, to most people it is. But now to you, it's just a temporary defeat. And folks, this stuff works. I know it works because I do it every single day. And it's really, really difficult to think about, but it's not difficult to do. You see, when we talk about the brain chemistry, and I am not a doctor by any stretch of the imagination, but when you talk about the brain chemistry and you talk about the power of positive thinking, people always talk about the power of positive thinking. That's positive thinking is very important, and it's not the end all be all, okay? But it is one step forward in the right direction. And so if you reprogram your mind and you tell yourself that, you know what, I'm not afraid to fail, which is the fatal version of it, but now I'm not afraid to suffer a temporary defeat. And maybe it truly is a failure. But wouldn't you rather have tried? I mean, wouldn't you want to at least give it a shot? And earlier I talked about how to mitigate that, how to prevent temporary defeats. And a lot of people, they're gung-ho, they have an idea and they want to do something and they go into it and it doesn't work. They suffer a temporary defeat and they may call it a failure. And they could have actually gone into that same scenario and actually been successful at it, but they didn't do something that's really, really key to success in general. Excuse me. They didn't prepare. Like, go back to my bar exam scenario. I was not prepared the first time around. I just wasn't. But I also began to reprogram my mind to understand that it was not a failure. In fact, in my office, I was going to bring it down for you. It's framed in my office. I actually have the letter that I got from the Board of Bar Overseers that says, "We regret to inform." To remind myself that if I had looked at that letter and called it a day, that would have been the ultimate failure. Yeah, and you know what? It would have been the ultimate failure for myself first, and for my family members, and then for everyone else. But when you're thinking about failure and success, the first thing you need to think about, folks, is yourself. Doesn't make you selfish, but really what we're talking about is you. We're talking about your brain. We're talking about your thoughts. We're talking about your success. And all of those things affect the people around you. So if you consider yourself a failure, if others consider yourself a failure, it affects your entire surroundings. And it always comes back to your family, right? That's really what we're talking about, is it comes back to your family. And it's really, really scary because families are where we learn things from. That's how human beings are created. That's how we grow. That's how we learn things. So, the takeaway from this is to no longer fail at anything. I tell people again that I've never failed at anything in my life. Doesn't it sound like such bullshit? It sounds so ridiculous and so overly confident, cocky, okay? I tell people that I've never failed at anything in my life. I suffer temporary defeats. Every single day I suffer temporary defeats. But I've never failed at anything. And when you start to program your brain that way, things start to happen for you. You're able to work through the temporary defeats in a different way than you would have if you would have considered them a failure. You're able to see things just a little bit differently. And then people around you are also able to see things a little bit differently. And like a disease, like we talked about, schistososis, your attitude and the way you think of things does infect others. And when you look at successful organizations and when you look at successful families, and family is, it's a ever-changing dynamic in what a family really is, and it's different in this day and age. And I'm glad that society has really kind of changed the definition of what a family is. But when you look at successful people, successful organizations, successful families, they think just a little bit differently than most other people. And that's really what it comes down to. Thinking just a little bit differently. So for those of you that are watching on Periscope and for those of you that are listening on my podcast, and maybe you're watching this video now, the takeaway from this is change the way you think about what failure really is, and it will ultimately change your life. Again, my name is Michael Alden. We're here at Vase Studios in Beverly, Massachusetts. You can check me out at michael-alden.com. You can Google me, and we're really, really excited. In the next few months, we're going to have some one-on-ones here, some trainings here, right in the campuses of Vase Marketing, where you're going to be able to sit down with me, and we're going to, really kind of dive into some things and get into a lot more detail about some of the things we're talking about today, and really how to take things to the next level. So if you're interested in really growing as a person, growing as an entrepreneur, growing as a business, I'm excited to share with you some of the things that we've done here, that I've done, and some of the things that I've learned, because I think that they can really help, and I've seen these concepts work for so many people. So again, stay tuned for that. There'll be some information on my website that we'll also be talking about in the next few weeks. But I want you to have a terrific day. My name is Michael Alden, and we'll see you next time.